Certain stories from the savannah appear to be nothing more than ordinary struggles for existence, yet they stir the soul in ways nobody anticipates. This is the journey of Eli, the tiniest and frailest cub in his pride. Left behind, ignored, and regarded as though he were invisible. But at the point when all hope seemed gone, Eli achieved something no one, least of all himself, ever imagined possible. He rose, confronted his destiny, and inspired the entire pride along with everyone observing from far away. Across the endless plains of Silver Dune Reserve, where the breeze whispered legends older than any wanderer could recall, a delicate lion cub named Eli took his first hesitant steps into life. From the instant he entered the world, it was obvious he was not like the others. His littermates were powerful, noisy, and burning with energy, while Eli could barely manage to raise his small head. The pride paid him little attention. To them, he was merely a silhouette, too tiny, too silent, too fragile to be important. As the early sunlight spilled across the parched plains, Eli observed his siblings chasing and play-fighting with carefree excitement. He yearned to be part of them, to experience the comfort of acceptance. But each time he attempted to join in, his legs shook beneath him, and he collapsed face first into the dust. Topper, the most daring cub, would often shove him aside as though he were nothing more than an overlooked stone. Jade copied her brother's behavior, turning her eyes away whenever Eli came near, as if his mere existence irritated her. Even in a land where survival ruled above all harshness, still crept into the smallest spaces. At the border of the open clearing, their mother Liana rested across a strip of shade, her eyes partly shut from fatigue. Eli summoned every trace of bravery within him and carefully stepped toward her, hoping she would allow him to nestle against her chest or provide the nourishment he desperately sought. But the instant she noticed him approaching, she rose sharply. Her tail snapped with irritation, and without sparing him a single look, she walked away to tend to one of the healthier cubs. Eli stood motionless, gazing at the spot she had just left. It felt as though the warmth he yearned for had slipped away between his paws. Elsewhere in the reserve, the faint swish of binocular straps disturbed the quiet. Ranger Olivia, who tracked the lions as part of a wildlife research project supported by ecotourism and conservation insurance programs, kept a careful eye on Eli. She had observed this pride for 5 years, long enough to recognize when something was wrong. Eli's hind legs quivered whenever he moved, and his posture was unsteady, as if a single misstep might send him crashing down. Olivia murmured into her recorder, noting that the cub seemed frailer than normal and might need monitoring for possible nerve injury, yet she also understood the boundaries. Nature had to follow its own path. Human involvement was restricted, no matter how strong the urge to intervene. Eli made another attempt to move among his siblings. They raced through the grass, leaping, play-biting, and practicing the fundamental skills their futures would rely on. Eli observed them with bright, yearning eyes, then stepped ahead with resolve. But Topper charged straight past him, slamming him to the ground. Jade giggled, circling him briefly, before sprinting off to rejoin the group. Grit coated his fur, and the ache of shame settled deep in his chest. Even so, he forced himself back onto his feet. If he surrendered now, he feared he would fade away completely. What Eli couldn't grasp, what no creature so young ever could, was that the world doesn't always grow gentler just because you are small. In moments like these, people far beyond the plains often searched for solace through retirement plans, home care, or even quiet journeys, hoping to discover purpose in struggle. For Eli, though, purpose was clear. Endure one more day. He drifted toward Liana, once more pushed by hunger more than any sense of hope. His legs trembled, his breathing grew shallow, and his small ribs pressed visibly against his frail body. He reached her side, lifting his head in silence, pleading for even the faintest trace of warmth. Liana looked down, and for a brief second, Eli believed she might finally let him come closer, but she turned away abruptly and crossed to the far side of the clearing. The rejection cut deeper than Topper's strikes ever had. A mother's distance was a pain no cub knew how to mend. Olivia slowly lowered her binoculars. "Little one," she whispered, "don't surrender just yet." She added another entry to her notes, her voice heavy with both worry and acceptance. She had witnessed many cubs like Eli, those who slipped unnoticed through the gaps abandoned by their own kin. But seldom had she seen such relentless resolve shining in eyes so young. The sun sank lower, stretching long shadows across the pride. Eli stood by himself, a small silhouette against the glowing plain. His siblings lay curled beside Liana, warm and protected, while he remained a few steps away, as though an unseen barrier separated him from the life he so desperately wanted to belong to. He bowed his head, his chest rising and falling, with slow, weary breaths. Somewhere deep within him, a quiet realization took shape. Defeated, yet awake. If he wanted a place in this world, he would have to earn it with every bit of strength he had left. And so, as the evening wind swept across the savannah, Eli took an unsteady step forward. Small, unsure, yet filled with stubborn bravery. He didn't know what tomorrow would hold, but he knew one truth. He would not give up, even if no one else believed in him. As the earliest glow of sunrise swept over Silver Dune Reserve, the pride slowly awakened. Liana stood extending her weary muscles, while Magnus motioned for the group to head toward a fresh stretch of grassland. The older cubs surged forward with enthusiasm, their paws sending up clouds of dust that shimmered in the golden morning light. Eli curled beneath a young acacia tree, where he had finally slipped into an uneasy sleep, sensed none of it. For the first time in his brief life, exhaustion had overtaken him, too worn out to stay watchful, too drained to dread what daylight might reveal. When he finally opened his eyes, the clearing lay deserted. The silence struck him first, a strange stillness that made his heart race. He raised his head, blinking at the faint tracks etched into the soil where the pride had passed only moments earlier. Fear flooded him like icy water. He called out with a weak, fractured cry, far too soft to travel across the open savannah. No response came. The warmth of his family, flawed though it had been, had faded into the distance. Eli staggered upright, his legs shaking beneath him. He breathed in deeply, desperately, seeking the fading scent of his mother and siblings. He followed it as best he could, but the trail was already dissolving under the rising heat. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself were dragging him back. From a ridge overlooking the plain, Ranger Olivia raised her binoculars. She had arrived earlier than normal to check on the pride, a standard duty within the wildlife program supported by tourism and conservation insurance partnerships. When she noticed Eli was absent from the group, she muttered quietly. They left without him. Her jaw clenched with concern. She watched the tiny cub limp across the open ground alone and already faltering. Into her recorder, she spoke softly. Eli shows severe dehydration, weakened mobility, extremely vulnerable. Without medical support, intervention remains limited. Below, Eli followed the faint trail until the ground grew too hot to retain the scent. The sun climbed quickly, and the calm morning air began to ripple with heat. He stopped beside a fallen log, gasping. His chest heaved in shallow spurts, and his hind legs shook uncontrollably. The savannah glowed beautifully in the early light, but to a cub on his own, it felt overwhelmingly endless. He took a few steps, stumbled, and nearly went down. Yet the thought of being abandoned, truly abandoned, forced him back onto his paws. As he pressed on, a soft rustle made his ears flick. A shape shifted several yards behind him. Eli turned, his heart pounding, as he spotted a solitary hyena, thin and starving, moving slowly in his direction. Its eyes shone with cold curiosity, the look predators wore when weighing whether a pursuit was worth the effort. Eli went still. There were no siblings to shield him, no towering mother to defend him. The hyena crept closer, lowering its head, studying this small, shaking cub, who couldn't outrun danger even on his strongest day. Eli retreated, but his back legs gave way beneath him. A tiny, helpless whimper escaped his throat. Olivia stiffened behind her binoculars. "No. Not today, little one," she whispered. Though she could not intervene directly, her movement along the ridge was just enough to draw the hyena's attention. The predator paused, glanced toward her distant silhouette, and reconsidered. After a long, tense moment, it turned away and melted back into the brush. Olivia finally let out the breath she had been holding. She understood this small mercy had only granted Eli moments, not true safety. Eli didn't know why the threat had vanished. He only knew one thing: he was still breathing. He pushed himself upright once more, his slight muscles burning in protest. The pride's fading trail bent eastward toward the wide plains where the sun continued to rise. He followed it with renewed urgency, even as exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Halfway across the clearing, he faltered. His vision spun. The ground seemed to sway. His mouth felt dry as dust. Had he been older, he might have grasped ideas like shelter protection or long-term survival plans, the things humans leaned on to endure life's hardships. But Eli knew only one truth: if he didn't reach his family, he wouldn't survive the day. He steadied himself, raised his head, and pressed on. Minutes later, Olivia spoke quietly into her recorder. "Cub continues tracking scent trail, persistent, remarkably persistent." Her voice carried both wonder and sadness. She longed to scoop him into her arms, the way people offered comfort or home care to those too fragile to stand alone. But in this land, Eli had to claim his place through nothing but determination. The sun climbed higher. The ground grew hotter. Still, Eli's small outline kept moving, stumbling, standing, stumbling again. No one waited for him. No one turned back. Yet something deep within him refused to give in. Dawn had taken his pride away, but he would not allow the day to end the same way. As the sun slipped below the crimson edge of Silver Dune Reserve, the day's warmth seeped out of the ground, replaced by a creeping cold that clung to the small and defenseless. Eli had spent the entire day fighting to stay on the fading trail of his pride. His legs shook with every step, and his breathing became shallow and uneven. When dusk finally settled over the grasslands, he found himself at the border of an open clearing, far too worn down to go on. His small body leaned against a low shrub, searching for whatever comfort it could provide. It wasn't much, just a sparse cover of leaves, but for this night, it would have to serve as refuge. Night on the savannah was nothing like the daylight hours. What once felt wide and empty now sharpened with unseen threats. Shadows drifted slowly across the land, and distant calls carried the stories of predators stirring from their daytime rest. Eli raised his head, ears flicking anxiously, his instincts warning him that darkness was no ally to a cub alone. From her lookout on a nearby rise, Ranger Olivia adjusted her night vision binoculars. She could barely make out Eli's small shape curled beneath the bush. Even through the lenses, he appeared painfully delicate. She spoke softly into her recorder. "Eli has stopped moving for the night. Dehydration and extreme fatigue remain evident. Without the protection of the pride, his survival risk is critically high." Her tone softened as she added, "If only wildlife regulations allowed emergency care in situations like this. But rules were rules, much like human lives safeguarded by insurance and home protection." Out here, Eli had nothing but instinct, and instinct alone was a fragile defense. The air grew colder by the minute. Eli curled tighter paws tucked beneath his chest, clinging to the last traces of warmth in his body. Then somewhere behind him, a soft rustle cut through the silence. His eyes snapped open. This was not the whisper of wind through grass. It was deliberate, heavy, slow, the footfall of a predator. Eli froze, barely breathing. Moments later, a lone hyena stepped out of the shadows, the same one that had stalked him earlier that morning. Its outline moved with smooth menace, shoulders rolling as it advanced. The animal lifted its nose, catching Eli's scent once more, stronger now, in the cool night air, thick with fear. Eli's heart slammed against his ribs. He pressed himself flat to the ground, trying to disappear. The hyena edged closer until it stood only a few yards away. A low growl vibrated through the stillness, a chilling reminder of how narrow the line between life and death truly was. For a cub without a mother's protection, ideas like planning or insurance meant nothing. Survival came down to these trembling seconds. Eli didn't move. He didn't even blink. Then, without warning, a harsh sound tore through the quiet. A loud, pained grunt echoed across the clearing. A young rhinoceros, limping from a fresh wound along its side, burst from the tall grass. The hyena snapped its head toward the noise, startled. The rhino, driven by pain and agitation, charged blindly, not at Eli, but close enough to shatter the predator's focus. The hyena snarled, unwilling to confront an animal so much larger. After a tense pause, it turned and retreated, fading back into the darkness. Eli didn't understand what had saved him, only that for now the danger was gone. He let out a shaky breath, the air he had been holding escaping in a trembling release. His small body quaked uncontrollably, chilled by both cold and fear. Even so, he didn't dare leave his hiding place. Olivia slowly lowered her binoculars, stunned by the sheer fortune that had spared the cub twice in a single day. "Little warrior," she murmured, "you're not quitting, are you?" She added another entry documenting the rhino's unexpected arrival and how it had interrupted a near attack. Throughout her years in wildlife work, she had witnessed moments of fate that seemed to defy reason, instances when nature granted unforeseen second chances. But rarely had she seen one creature receive so many within the span of one day. The hours dragged on. Darkness grew heavier, folding around Eli like an icy blanket. Hunger twisted his stomach and thirst scorched his throat. Yet fear of stepping into the open kept him frozen in place. Around him, the night came alive, insects chirring, distant lions calling, jackals yelping far away. Each sound echoed his loneliness. Each sound reminded him that without his pride he was nothing more than a fragile pulse in a hostile world. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, picturing the warmth beside his mother, the comfort of his siblings pressed close, but those memories now felt far away, like dreams fading upon waking. What remained was determination, thin and delicate, yet somehow strong enough to keep him alive. Just before midnight, a cool wind swept across the reserve, whispering through the trees and carrying with it the faint scent of the pride drifting back toward Eli. His ears flicked. Hope sparked, small, uncertain, but real. Maybe they weren't as distant as he feared. Maybe if he endured the night, he could still find them. He curled tighter beneath the bush, his small frame trembling. But within him, a quiet resolve took shape. The world was still harsh, still immense, still terrifying. Yet dawn would come, and when it did, he would rise once more. For now he clung to the single truth that had carried him through the day. He might be weak, but he was not done yet. From the opposite side of the clearing, Magnus observed with detached eyes. The powerful lion flicked his tail once, yet made no move to interfere. Within the rules of the pride, strength prevailed. The weak either hardened with time or disappeared altogether. Even Liana, who should have defended her smallest cub, remained motionless beside Magnus. Her gaze settled on Eli for only a brief instant, clouded with conflict fatigue and perhaps a trace of remorse, but she did not act. Eli pulled himself away from the cub's abuse and limped toward her. Each step was a silent plea, every breath a desperate search for comfort. When he finally reached her side, he nudged her gently, longing for the warmth and nourishment he had been denied for so long. But Liana stood at once, placing several feet of distance between them. Eli's ears drooped as he watched her walk away, her back turned as though facing him was too painful or too meaningless. Ranger Olivia far enough away to remain unseen, yet close enough to witness it all, felt her heart sink. She murmured into her recorder, "Eli has rejoined the pride but continues to face aggressive rejection." She noted the increasing weakness in his hind legs, the possibility of a worsening injury. If this persists, survival without medical care is unlikely. Her voice carried the same quiet ache, known to those who have watched loved ones struggle alone despite the best senior care or retirement living options available. She wished nature showed more mercy. She wished the rules allowed intervention. But wishes held no power against the reality unfolding below. Still determined to remain near the pride, Eli tried once more to approach Liana. He lowered his head and positioned himself carefully beside her, hoping she might finally accept him. Instead, Magnus stepped forward, steering Liana and the other cubs away. His immense form loomed over Eli, who shook uncontrollably. Magnus did not strike him, but the meaning was unmistakable. Eli did not belong near the heart of the pride, not now, and perhaps not ever. The rejection cut deeper than any physical blow. Eli retreated his paws, carving shallow lines in the dirt as he backed away. He struggled to stay upright, but his weakened legs failed him once more. He sank gently onto his side, gasping from pain, heartbreak, and exhaustion. Above him, the sky shimmered with heat, yet he felt only cold. Even so, Eli would not give in. Slowly, unsteadily, he rose again and moved toward the edge of the clearing. If he could not claim a place at the pride's center, he would remain close to its shadow. Even that was safer than the night he had survived alone. As the afternoon light grew gentler, the pride began to rest. Magnus settled onto the ground. Jade and Topper nestled close to Liana, and the air slowly fell quiet. No one beckoned Eli closer. No one turned to acknowledge him. Yet he watched them all the same, his eyes holding a silent hope that no amount of rejection could fully extinguish. Maybe tomorrow, he thought, things would change. He did not yet know that the hardest trials were still to come. But neither did he realize the strength quietly forming within him, growing with every refusal, every solitary step, a strength that would one day compel the entire pride to regard him with awe. The late-day sun washed Granite Ridge in a softened gold, dulling the jagged edges of stone, but doing nothing to ease the weight of the day Eli had survived. After the assaults from his siblings and the distant dismissal of his mother, his small body felt heavier than ever before. Each breath came with a slight shake, and when he tried to move, his legs trembled as if they might give way beneath him. He braced himself, but the instant he shifted his weight, a sharp surge of pain shot up his spine, forcing him to stop cold. Ranger Olivia observed from her far-off position, binoculars steady in her grip. She had seen cubs stumble before, had watched them trip, fall, and rise again. But Eli's movement was different. His hind legs no longer followed the natural rhythm of a young lion. They lagged behind, hesitated, failed to mirror the motion of his front paws. Olivia frowned, murmuring into her recorder. Possible nerve involvement or early spinal trauma worsening since yesterday. In another life, she thought a creature like Eli might receive treatment or long-term care, much like families depended on health coverage or financial safeguards when life turned uncertain. But here on the open savannah, there was no such protection. Eli tried once more to move closer to the pride, edging forward with cautious steps. Yet even walking had become a test. He caught his paw on a small stone and fell onto his side, dust lifting around him like a quiet breath. For a moment the world spun. He lay still, chest heaving, as though each breath carried a question he didn't know how to answer. Slowly he pushed himself upright again. His legs shook beneath him, nearly refusing to cooperate, but something within him, fragile yet unbreakable, drove him onward. He limped ahead until he reached a narrow patch of shade beneath a jutting rock. Lowering himself carefully, he curled into the cool dust, eyes dull but alert. From there, he watched the pride at a distance, listening to Jade's playful growls and Topper's victorious chirps as they fought imaginary battles. They were learning, growing stronger, becoming everything young lions were meant to be. Eli was learning too, but his lessons were different. Liana looked toward Eli only once. A fleeting glance, her expression caught between confusion and quiet resignation. She sensed that something was wrong with him, yet seemed unable or unwilling to fully face it. Instinct urged her to invest in strength. Nature's unforgiving economy left little space for mercy. Still, for a single heartbeat, there was gentleness in her eyes, only for a heartbeat. Magnus stretched atop a warm slab of rock, releasing a low rumble that signaled both dominance and indifference. His massive body shifted slightly with the breeze as he watched his cubs at play. Eli was not among them. He wasn't even nearby. In Magnus's world, power defined value, and Eli simply did not qualify. When the wind changed, a sudden chill swept along Eli's spine, setting off another tremor in his legs. He tried to rise, believing, however faintly, that if he showed just a bit more endurance, the pride might finally accept him. But as he pushed upward, his hind legs failed again. This time his chin struck the ground before he could brace himself. A small cry slipped out, born more of frustration than pain. Olivia's breath caught at the sight. She jotted down another note. Mobility deteriorating. If this continues, survival probability decreases significantly. Her voice softened as she added, "He's trying so hard. Too hard." In her years observing wildlife, she had witnessed nature's cruelty countless times. She understood its necessity. Yet each story, like Eli's, lodged itself in her heart as a quiet, persistent ache. The fragility of the young often reminded her of the elderly back home, those who required gentle support, patient care, and careful planning to navigate their vulnerable years. Eli had none of that. Only instinct. Only hope. As the afternoon light faded into muted amber, the pride began to shift. Jade and Topper ran past Magnus, tumbling into a heap of playful growls and flailing paws. Liana rose to lick the dust from their coats. Eli watched the warm scene with wide, yearning eyes. His tail twitched, hesitant and small. He wanted to be near them, to feel even a trace of that warmth. With trembling resolve, he moved forward, one step, then another, then a third. But before he could go any farther, his hind legs gave out completely. He dropped to his belly, unable to rise again. His breathing grew shallow as he pressed his small face into the crook of his paws. It wasn't the pain that frightened him most. It was the feeling of being left behind once more. The pride did not notice his collapse. Not Magnus, not Jade or Topper, not even Liana. The world around Eli carried on a cruel reminder that weakness often becomes invisible long before it turns fatal. As dusk approached, a soft breeze brushed through his fur, cooling the burning ache along his spine. Eli lifted his head just enough to look at the pride one last time. Something inside him whispered that tomorrow would be harder still, that his body might betray him further. But another voice, a quiet, fragile spark, told him to hold on. And so he did. He closed his eyes and let the night settle around him, unaware that this growing injury would soon thrust him into the most dangerous trial of his young life. The sun rose with a weight that mirrored the heaviness in Eli's small body. Morning light spilled across Silver Dune Reserve in broad washes of orange and gold, yet none of its warmth reached him. Every muscle ached from the torment of the day before, and his injured spine sent sharp jolts down his hind legs whenever he shifted his weight. Still, as the pride began to stir and prepare for the trek toward Willow Bend, Eli forced himself upright. He knew that if he didn't move now, if he hesitated even briefly, he would fall behind again, and this time he might never catch up. Magnus led the pride with a powerful, assured stride, his mane catching the early light. Jade and Topper bounded alongside Liana, brimming with energy and certainty. Eli trailed behind, struggling to keep pace. After only a handful of steps, his back legs wavered. He stumbled, steadied himself, and pressed on. Grace no longer carried him forward, desperation did. The savannah's heat rose quickly, forming an invisible wall that pressed against his chest. His breaths grew shallow, and his vision dimmed at the edges. He fixed his gaze on the swaying tails of his siblings, using them as markers so he wouldn't lose the pride. But with every step, those shapes blurred further away. Behind them, Ranger Olivia followed at a careful distance in her jeep, honoring the wildlife program's rule of non-interference. Through her binoculars, she tracked Eli's every falter, every tremor in his legs. Speaking quietly into her recorder, she noted extreme fatigue, possible dehydration. If this were a human case, she thought immediate medical coverage or emergency aid would be advised. But the words trailed off, swallowed by the low hum of the savannah. Bound by protocol and by nature itself, all she could do was observe. By midday, the heat had turned merciless. The pride continued forward, driven by the promise of water at Willow Bend. They did not slow for Eli. He fell farther behind, his small paws dragging through the dust. Each step felt like lifting a weight twice his size. His mouth was parched, his tongue thick, and a dull pounding ache filled his head. He called out softly, but no one turned, not Magnus, not Liana, not even Jade or Topper. Eli stumbled again, this time dropping to his knees. He tried to rise, but his hind legs refused to respond. Dust coated his fur and clung to his whiskers. For a moment he lay still, letting the world spin. His mind drifted back to the night he spent alone, the hyena, the cold, the terrifying silence. He knew he could not survive another night like that. And so somehow he stood again. The pride reached a slope overlooking Willow Bend when Liana finally looked back. She saw Eli, a small, staggering figure barely managing to move forward. For a single heartbeat, doubt crossed her eyes. But Magnus nudged her onward, a silent reminder that the strong must keep moving. Liana followed. Nature did not wait for the weak. Eli pushed himself harder, even as his body cried out in protest. The incline toward Willow Bend felt impossibly steep. His legs shook uncontrollably, and several times he slipped on loose sand, catching himself just in time. The sun beat down without mercy, turning the air into a wavering blur. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out everything but the harsh rasp of his breathing. Olivia watched with rising alarm. "He's fading," she murmured. "If he goes down here, he won't get back up." She made another quick note, comparing his condition to moments when people depended on financial security or careful retirement planning to endure life's harshest trials. But Eli had none of that, no safeguards, no support. Only instinct, only hope. When Eli finally reached Willow Bend, the pride was already drinking. The sight of water made his heart surge with desperate hope. He stumbled forward, driven by thirst and exhaustion, aiming to drink beneath his mother's protection. But Liana stepped away again, just as she had so many times before. Eli froze, confusion clouding his weary eyes. He lowered his head to drink from an open patch of water, but Jade darted past him, splashing playfully, and knocking him aside without noticing. Eli lost his balance and fell forward, his face striking the muddy edge. He lifted his head slowly, water clinging to his lashes. The rejection burned, yet his thirst burned deeper. He crawled forward again, desperate for even a single sip. Suddenly Magnus growled. The signal was clear, the break was over. The pride moved on without looking back. Eli's heart sank. He had barely tasted the water. His legs trembled violently as he tried to follow. Halfway across the clearing, his hind legs buckled completely. He collapsed, breath shallow, body shaking with exhaustion. Ahead, the pride's silhouettes drifted farther away beneath the blazing sun, but something inside him refused to surrender. With a fragile cry, Eli pulled himself forward inch by inch, carving faint lines in the dust. His hind legs dragged weakly behind him, but they moved. He kept his eyes fixed on the pride, the home he still believed was his. Under the unforgiving sun, the smallest and weakest cub of Silver Dune Reserve showed a strength no one had expected. The pride soon reached a narrow, muddy channel at Willow Bend. To the adults, it was routine. They crossed, without hesitation. Jade and Topper splashed ahead carefree. Liana followed, glancing back only to check on her stronger cubs. Eli was far behind, still battling every step. Pain flared through his injured spine, but the sight of his family on the far bank pulled him forward. If he didn't reach them now, he knew he would be left behind again, and nature did not offer endless chances. From her jeep, Ranger Olivia watched with rising fear. High-risk crossing, she whispered into her recorder. Muddy depth. Possible predators. Eli reached the water's edge just as the last of the pride stepped out. He let out a faint cry. Too soft for most ears, but not for Liana's. She hesitated, conflict flickering across her face. Magnus nudged her forward. The pride moved on. Eli stepped into the murky water. The cold shocked him, but he pushed forward. Mud swallowed his paws, dragging him down. Every inch felt impossible. Then the water shifted. A ripple. Another. A shadow glided beneath the surface, a juvenile crocodile, small but deadly enough. Eli froze. Fear surged through him as the predator circled closer. Exhaustion stole his strength. Then the silence shattered. A roar. Liana plunged into the water, fury and instinct exploding from her. She charged between Eli and the predator, roaring again, teeth bared. The crocodile hesitated, then vanished beneath the mud. Eli collapsed, trembling. Liana reached him, nudging his head gently. For the first time, her touch held tenderness. She guided him from the water, shielding him with her body, waiting whenever he stumbled. On the far bank, she curled protectively around him, warming his frail frame. For the first time, Eli felt what it meant to belong. Across the clearing, the pride watched in stunned silence. Even Magnus paused. He approached slowly, studied Eli, then stepped aside, not in dismissal, but acceptance. The message was unmistakable. As the pride moved toward their resting ground, they slowed. They waited. Jade no longer blocked Eli's path. Topper circled him with curiosity instead of scorn. Eli walked on trembling legs, weak but proud. For the first time, he wasn't chasing the pride. He was part of it. As dusk settled over the savannah, Eli lifted his head, a warm breeze carrying the scent of home. The smallest cub with the weakest body had revealed the strongest heart. Invisible no longer, Eli had earned his place not through strength or speed, but through courage that refused to break. If Eli's journey moved you in any way, I invite you to leave a simple 0 or 1 in the comments. It's a quiet sign that you're here, that you watched, that you felt, and that you walked this difficult path alongside him. Sometimes even the smallest response means more than words. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining our membership community. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories like Eli's stories of resilience, hope, and the fragile yet powerful bond between wildlife and those who bear witness to their struggles. Eli's story is not just about survival, it's about being seen, about enduring when the world turns away, and about how courage, even in its smallest form, can change everything. Stay with us. This is only one chapter in a much larger world. Many more remarkable journeys are waiting for you in the videos ahead.